Welcome to the Champs App podcast, where we help players and parents demystify the world of minor hockey development and recruiting for both girls and boys. On today's episode, I talk with Jess Cameron, who is the Director of Women's Hockey at Neutral Zone. We talk about the scouting services Neutral Zone provides to coaches, players, and parents, how players are scouted and rated, and how coaches use player ratings and reviews. This was a very informative conversation with Jess, so I hope you like it. Before we get to today's amazing episode, I wanted to talk to you about the app part of Champs App. Did you know that there are over 30 NCAA coaches with Champs App profiles that you can connect with directly? These include coaches from every D1 conference. Champs App lets you create a free, beautiful online hockey resume to share with coaches, teams, and players. Your profile includes all the information coaches want to know to help decide if you are a player they want to keep on their recruiting radar. When you connect with coaches, they will receive automatic updates when you change your profile, add game or video, or alert them to upcoming games on your schedule. Just go to champs.app and click the sign up button to start your profile. You can check out the full list of the NCAA coaches using Champs App by clicking on the links in the show notes. I'm very excited to have on the podcast Jess Cameron, who is the Director of Women's Hockey at Neutral Zone, which provides in-depth amateur scouting coverage and rankings for women's and men's hockey. Originally from Mount Mellick PEI, Jess was a goalie who played college hockey at Castleton University in Vermont before immediately joining Neutral Zone to build the women's platform. So welcome to the podcast, Jess.
Thanks, Ray.
Hey, the reason why I asked you to come on and chat with us is I've been following you for a couple of years on social media, and I've seen some posts with kind of give detailed kind of scouting reports on some players that, at events that I've been at. And but I still, at the end of the day, really don't fully understand what Neutral Zone is all about. And so I would love to hear from your perspective, everything that Neutral Zone does and how folks can benefit from it. But before we do that, as we do all our guests, I'd love to just get into a little bit of your hockey history and how you ended up playing college hockey in Vermont.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. I guess I was on PEI and at the time, the minor hockey, it was still good. And I'm still a strong believer that, if you're good enough, you'll get seen. And I had some friends that had played, throughout minor hockey and did go on to play the U Sport level and whatnot. So it is possible. But for me, I went to a prospect camp and got recruited there to go out and play in Alberta. And it was a good fit for me to develop. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to play college hockey. I wanted to keep going. So actually my best friend, Shannon McCauley, who's from PEI as well, went on to play for Team Canada and win the national championship with Clarkson. We left at the same time to go to Warner. So that made the transition pretty smooth. And
can you explain what Warner is for folks who don't know?
Yes, yeah. Warner Hockey School, it's no longer in existence, but it was pretty premier women's hockey program, played in the JWHL. It was basically a hockey school within the public school in Warner, originally designed to save the town school as they had such a low population. They couldn't, continue to offer a school for such few students. So they brought in the hockey program and so we were the only sports team there that really went away and did things like that, but well integrated in with the public school as well.
And Jess, correct me if I'm wrong, you went there for your grad year. So you had actually already graduated high school from Alberta, and then you moved to New Hampshire to Warner to play hockey prior to college. Is that correct?
Well, Warner was actually the one in Alberta.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So I went there. No, that's okay. I went there for grade 9 and grade 10.
Yeah.
And then I left and I actually came back to PEI for 1 year in grade 11. Okay. It just, wasn't a good fit anymore. And so I came back and I quickly realized again, if I still wanted to pursue my goals, I was going to have to go and seek out some different level of hockey and some hockey that was going to put me in front of more scouts that I was, that was where I was looking to go. So I went to Brewster in New Hampshire for grade 12.
Gotcha. Okay, I gotcha. So in Canada, the high school system is slightly different than the US, at least for sure in Quebec. I know that from firsthand experience. Yes. And so is that how that all played out in that the opportunity to go to grade 12 in Brewster?
Yeah, no, I didn't PG at all. So they had, that was an offer when I went. I could have played 2 more years of hockey or whatever. At the time, I wasn't interested in that. So it was just my grade 12 year I went down there.
Okay, gotcha. And then how did you end up at Castleton?
Yeah, so kind of interesting story. I was recruited by a few schools. And so I kind of went through and mostly Division 3 at that point. We had a couple D1s in there for a little bit, but yeah, I went to visit Oswego, which is eventually where I committed to play at Oswego. And I was ready to go. I was very excited. And then that was right in the mix when the SUNY schools had to take away the international scholarship from athletes, because the number of athletes getting it versus non-athletes was skewed, and it was looking like an athletic scholarship. So basically in May, they kind of told everyone that, you could still come, you'd have to pay in state or out of state or whatever. So it would have been a lot more expensive for me, and it wasn't possible. So in May, as I was trying to graduate, I was back in the pool and trying to, find a spot. We evaluated a ton of options at that point, but I was originally recruited by Castleton. So I called that coach back and said, like, hey, do you still need a goalie? And it turns out he did. So I basically, long story short, committed there, sight unseen, never had been there. Yeah, and off I went that fall to Castleton without ever seeing the place. Yeah.
Wow. So like there are multiple things that I get from that story. So first of all, talk about the stress of that recruiting process, because I know a lot of players and parents are going through stress these days with recruiting. So just tell me how you handled all that stress.
Yeah, I mean, not great at the time, I won't lie. I remember vividly binge watching Pretty Little Liars with like a just mountain of Kleenex in the room because I was so upset about losing that. What I thought was going to be where I was going to go. I was so ready. I had met with the team, the coaches. I was so excited. So the stress was, yeah, it was a lot. I gratefully, like, my father was pretty active in helping and, keeping me on track there. As well, like, Brewster had a ton of support. So I was lucky in that sense where, they really wanted to, push their student athletes and just students on to play at the next level. So there were, college advisors there and whatnot that I could lean on in that sense. But yeah, the stress was tough. And, I don't know if there's really a way to avoid it. It's a stressful time. And I don't know, you just got to keep reminding yourself it's for something good, right? You're stressing because you have that dream and you want to keep going and you want to find a good fit. So, I mean, eventually it'll push you a little bit, but you definitely have to be cautious about how much stress you're taking on, especially as a student athlete. You're already under a ton of stress. So, finding little things that are going to help calm you down. It's different for everyone. Maybe it's walks, maybe it's meditation, maybe it's podcasts. For me, it was Pretty Little Liars.
Excellent. Some good advice there. So, another piece of advice I'm curious is, would you recommend accepting an offer from a school without ever visiting it?
Yeah, I don't know if I would recommend it per se. I think it's possible. I mean, the situation I was in was I wanted to play hockey. This was kind of my last choice. This was my last option. It was what was available to me. Brewster couldn't take me for another year at that point. And I wanted to play, so I was willing to do it. I think there's a lot of value in going to see schools first. Because coaches and players, right? You want it to be a good fit. You want it to be comfortable. Coaches don't want you coming there and not being happy either. So it is nice to go and to feel the environment and feel the team atmosphere. A lot of times that's really going to be what makes your decision is how that school feels. So I would definitely recommend going to visit if you can. If you can't, just be prepared to ask the questions that are going to, give you what you're looking for, depending on what you are looking for in a school. And like for me, it was, coaches, plans, their vision for the team. Are they a coach that, just arrived? Are they, a new coach? Are they trying to win a national championship? How much importance do they put on team culture and team activities? Just all sorts of things. So just, taking some time to figure out what it is that you really want in a school. And if you're unable to visit, just making sure that you get those answers.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I'm going to transition now into kind of now what you do after graduating from Castleton. But before we get into those specific details, you played the goalie position, and I'm wondering how much playing goalie and playing that position has helped you on the scouting side of things. Because I've spoken to previous pro goalies, and historically, people think they get hit in the head and maybe they're not so smart. But one former pro goalie told me, "You forget we're on the ice 60 minutes and we watch the whole game, and so we got nothing else to do but then figure out who does what and who's good at what and what their tendencies are, and they actually know more about anybody else other than maybe the head coach in terms of what's actually going on with every position on the team." So maybe talk about how goaltending has actually helped you become a scout.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, initially I was nervous about that as well. I mean, I think we're our own harshest critics, and I was fresh 21 coming out of college there. So I was nervous about everything. But yeah, no, I think it prepared me really well. Like with everything you're saying, you're on the ice, you're watching, you're anticipating in a lot of different ways. And for sure, there was a bit of a learning curve. Just with some terminology and systems that I maybe didn't quite pay as much attention to as a goalie, because, my role was different. But at the end of the day, I knew all the stuff. I knew what you needed to prevent a shot. I knew what you needed to kind of break out of the zone, just because I'd been able to watch it for so many years. So I definitely think it prepared me in a lot of ways. I may not have known it at the time, but even now, we've hired a couple scouts that had been goalies, and they kind of came in with the same sort of anxieties as well. Like, well, maybe I'll just scout goalies and whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, that's okay if you want to scout goalies, but I think you definitely have the tools to scout the full game, and I can help you in whatever way. And it's been great. Our scouts that have been goalies have been excellent, and I actually think we have quite a few of them at this point.
Awesome. So before we once again get into neutral zone, maybe just talk about your role for helping out with the Canada Games this year, and Prince Edward Island specifically.
Yeah, so it's very exciting. We've been kind of working on this for about a year and a half. I was selected as a head coach for Team PEI. It got a little confusing with COVID, as most things do. So we missed some training time there, but we were able to, get in as much training as we were able to. A spring camp, a summer camp, another spring camp, and we just finished off some Christmas camps here, and finally selected our 20-person roster. We initially started with a group of 40 as our training team to take them through the summer, tons of activities, ice times, things like that, and then eventually selected our group of 20. We're just waiting for the release, but the players are all aware of who's been selected. So that's been a really rewarding and amazing experience. I love coaching it. What I do with scouting is a bit removed from the players. That's to make it unbiased. We don't talk to the players a ton. We don't know, are they a great student? Are they looking for great schools? Are they also a lacrosse player? Did they just start hockey a little later? There's all sorts of things that, we miss out on as scouts, staying so removed, that when I'm coaching, I get to have that, one-on-one connection with the players that I really appreciate and value a ton. So it's a nice little balance for me. Of course, it gets very busy, but it's a nice little balance to be able to have that, close connection with players.
And real quick, where are the Canada Games and when are they taking place this summer?
Yeah, so they're actually coming up at the end of February, and they're on Prince Edward Island. So we are hosting,
Wow.
which is a really cool experience. And I think the girls are gonna be really ready to go in front of their home crowd. So that's gonna start at the end of February through March 6th. So it's a 2-week event. We are the second week women's hockey. So we come in February 26th on the Sunday, and we go until March 6th. So
Nice.
yeah.
Exciting. Well, good luck to you and the team.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So as I understand it, you started working at Neutral Zone right out of college, and you basically started the whole women's program. So before we get into the services that you provide, maybe I know you aren't the original founder of Neutral Zone, but maybe you can just explain, if you know the answer, as to why it's called Neutral Zone.
Yeah. So I guess it's I was actually interning on the men's side in my senior year, so I did have a little bit of insight going forward into the women's side, and that's sort of why I got hired on. But yeah, the two owners, Brendan Collins and Steve Wilk, kind of started it because Steve's son was involved in that men's hockey 21-year-old freshman situation, where sometimes you're promised a little bit more, play another year of junior, and then you end up at college, you didn't know you were trying out, and you get cut. So there was a lot of Steve was really passionate or really driven by the fact that we could help players understand where they fit a little bit better, and whether it's never been intended to crush anyone's dreams or anything like that. It's just more or less, hey, if I'm a 3-star or whatever, maybe I'll take that D3 email a little bit more seriously. I can open up some options, right? Things like that. And Brendan has always been an incredible hockey scout. He worked for USHR, I believe, for a little while, and actually coached me at Castleton as an assistant coach for a little bit. And the name Neutral Zone kind of comes from the unbiased and neutral scouting service that we're looking to provide.
Gotcha. And so please explain exactly what is the services that you provide. Like I've never logged into your actual system, but like I said, I've seen different posts and stuff like that. So explain to parents and players, and believe it or not, we actually do have a lot of coaches who listen to this too. So maybe for folks who aren't registered with your service to explain exactly what it is that you folks do.
Yeah, for sure. So I see us, there's a few different ways, when you're talking about how parents and players can use us versus college coaches, or prep coaches, or any recruiting needs. For those college coaches and things like that, I see us as a bit of a recruiting tool. So we post reports, ratings, and rankings on players. Ideally, every female player, amateur player in Canada and the US, but obviously that's a building up process. We have to, keep working to get to every player, but that's the ultimate goal. So we go to major events all across Canada and the US, as well as in-season scouting. And the reason we do this is because, with college coaches, you have a limited staff and a budget. What we do is we watch all the time. We're not worried about coaching our team, right? We're not worried about financial help or getting kids into school, admissions, things like that, right? All we do is we scout, we watch their performance, and we put it up, right? So coaches can come and they can read and they can search through players and sort and filter to try to find players that may meet their needs. I like to think of it as, like even those top schools that have, tons of resources and staff and things like that. You can't get everywhere. You can't get to every single league game in New England prep. Sometimes it's really difficult to get to Western Canada with the weather and whatnot. So, maybe you see a kid that we wrote up as an A+ that you hadn't heard about. Maybe that gives you the push to kind of go out and see them. Hey, like, I haven't heard of this kid. Maybe I'll go check that kid out. And then all the way down through, D3 schools that have a very limited budget in a lot of cases and a very limited staff. Oftentimes it's a head coach and an assistant, and you really need at least 2 on the bench. So in-season recruiting and scouting is very difficult for a D3 school, especially for regions that aren't local to them. So we're able to extend our reach a lot further and a lot more consistently throughout the season to help cover these girls and, highlight their performance in these events throughout the season.
Gotcha. And do you feel that you mentioned the origination of Neutral Zone around like getting a realistic assessment of where you really fit? Do you find that on the girls / women's side that's all still kind of fits as if you're a player or a parent of like here's a realistic assessment of my abilities?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like we do a bit of analytics every year of where our star rated players go. And so, it's constantly assessing, what our star rating system is. And, oh, are we a little off? Were there more 3 stars going D1 than we had planned, or things like that. And so we're always taking a look and always getting better that way. But yeah, I would say so, especially from the reports, because the reports are more wordy. So we'll write up the player as they are in a way that you can understand. So that kind of supplements those star ratings, because of course there's going to be a ton of 4-star D that are excellent D1 talent. But what does the coach need? Do they need a tall D with a heavy point shot? Do they need a small little nimble D who's very agile at the point? That's where you kind of get into more of those details in those reports. You can read about how the player plays, what they do well, and what areas may need a little improvement to get to the next level.
Gotcha. And like I still got so many questions to ask you. So how do you get all the coverage across all the different regions? I as of right now, I only know 2 of your scouts, but obviously you've got more because, I doubt you're in Western Canada or some other areas like Minnesota. So maybe share some of those, background information.
For sure. So on the women's side, we usually keep staff of around 15 to 20. So we that was initially what I did when I first started, was we evaluated all of the Division 1 and Division 3 rosters. Where are the players coming from? Where are most of the D1 players coming from? To kind of help us identify the major markets, right? So that was Ontario, Minnesota, and New England. So we knew we needed to cover those really well. Particularly Ontario, where there's tons of teams. Same with Minnesota. You're playing in-season games all the time, and that kind of goes back to college's ability to scout. We usually keep a staff of around 15 to 20. On the women's side, we have, the major markets covered really well in Ontario, Minnesota, and New England. We do have scouts in Western Canada, Michigan, Pittsburgh, Atlantic Canada, and a little bit in Ottawa, Quebec area. Though we need to kind of integrate a little bit more into Quebec. We don't have any French speakers on staff at this point, which has been a bit of a hurdle. But yeah, so that's where we started. We started in those major markets and kind of branched out from there. And now it's, if there's something starting up somewhere and they're having a bunch of tournaments, okay, we got to hire someone there. So we have our regional staffs, which all have, in those major markets, Minnesota, New England, and Ontario, they have a head scout. So the head scout controls and schedules all of the regional scouts, and they will all report to that head scout. So the idea behind that is that there's a check with what the regional scouts are doing by the head scout, and then nothing gets updated on the site except for when I update it. So I have the final check. So we always have those few layers of, people have seen this kid at the regional level, the head scout level, and then the director level, to ensure that we're being as accurate as possible. And that also helps us, be able to schedule and make sure that we're getting to the maximum amount of games possible.
Gotcha. And how do you sync up the different reports from different scouts? Because I'm assuming some players you only see a couple of times, other players on popular teams, you might see a dozen times. So how do you work out, that kind of amalgamation and then, averaging out all the ratings and stuff like that?
Yeah, for sure. Well, we don't rate anyone we haven't seen at least twice at least 2 different events. So, that gives people the opportunity to really, show what they have. And that's kind of, why we rate, give letter grades on tournaments, right? Because people have good and bad tournaments. It's very different. So we try to make sure that we see everyone, twice at 2 different events. And then there's, like, as I said, the head scout and myself, we have taken on Clint now as our director of US scouting. So he's going to be a little more involved with that as well, is just making sure that we have seen all these players at least a little bit, at least their team, at least their league, and we can know for sure if that's making sense, right? Like, are we getting 105 stars from Minnesota? Well, that's not right, let's see what's going on here. So basically it's just those like levels of checks and just, staying on top of everything. We've been really fortunate to retain a lot of our core staff in those major regions, which helps a lot from year to year. You're not training someone to kind of get up to date, but when anyone does start as a scout, we typically, have them watch those Division I committed players first, so they can see, here's the top. Now let's work our way down, right? We got to see who the absolute best is. This is where we're trying to get to. Let's go down. So those commitments have helped us a ton. And even from the start, that's where I started as well, is watching those D1 committed players to get an idea of what that top level was.
And roughly speaking, what's the difference between like a 5-star recruit and a 3-star recruit?
Yeah, for sure. So we say like a 5-star is very rare. We'll usually have a couple in each grad year, if that, and that would be a kid that is a for sure immediate impact Division I player, likely Olympian upside, just the top of the top. This kid's going to be great. She's going to impact the game for a long time. So that would be like someone like Abby Murphy from the United States, was a 5-star for a long time. And when you get down to a 3-star, as you go down, 3-star is about, D3 talent, a good immediate impact D3 player. And as you go up at 375, 3.5s, you're kind of getting to, D1 or U Sport fit. We're getting a lot more U Sports pushing that 4-star and maybe even a little above. When we initially started, I would say U Sport was a little heavier on their commits towards the D3 level of star ratings. And it's quickly taken off to being much more comparable with the D1 game, which is an exciting thing to have two very competitive leagues for girls to play in, and as well as D3, because we all know that D3 is a very competitive place to play as well.
Gotcha. Okay. So but I'd kind of like to actually transition into actual player evaluation. So, I've gone through several tryout situations across the United States. I've also been involved with seeing both USA Hockey and a little bit of Hockey Canada going through their selection process. And kind of what I've kind of seen from most folks is there are really no clear guidelines for exactly what they're looking for. It's very dependent on what either the coach is looking for or their personal preferences. Can be subjective, can be political at some points and things like that. So I'm curious how you rate players by position. And let's start with the one that you're most familiar with, the goaltending position. Like how do you evaluate a goalie, especially if you're only seeing them maybe twice in a weekend at an event?
Yeah, goaltending is tough like that. It's possible that our scheduling for a tournament, right? We don't know who's in for that game, right? So it's possible that we have scheduled to see the Philly Flyers at 8 a.m. on Friday and then 7 p.m. on Saturday, and that goalie played the morning on Saturday. So we didn't see her. So that's tough. And we definitely try to keep track of that and try to do our best to see, every goalie. We all know that goaltending is a tough position in a lot of ways. Recruiting, getting seen, just mental aspects and your role on a team. But yeah, I look for their technical skills. But lately it's been a lot of just, the opportunity to win a game. If a goalie has given their team the opportunity to win, they've done their job. And that can be just the opportunity to win, and then like absolutely saved the team. Team shouldn't win, but they won because of the goalie, right? Seeing a couple games from a kid like that shows something special. So that's been something I've been looking for a lot lately, is just the ability to turn it up in those high pressure situations and shut the door.
Gotcha. And are there specific attributes that you track or measure, like rebound control or lateral movement or glove hand, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. What we put on neutral zone is not, we started like that where we were giving like ratings in each, puck skill, skating, things like that. But it wasn't as useful to our users. So we did transition into those wordy reports, right? So that people can read, oh, here is what this player is, right? This is what this goalie is like. And, people are looking for different goalies. Smaller, taller, fast, fills the net, loves to play the puck, all sorts of things, right? So we're not necessarily, we're obviously rating their impact and their ability to find a spot moving forward. But yeah, we write about who they are and how they play. So then coaches and anyone can come on and see, okay, this is what this goalie really is.
Gotcha. And so let's move over into the forwards, where there's just a huge variety in the different segments of types of forwards. So how do you handle that?
Yeah, well, a similar way, right? Like it's a bit of a balancing act, right? Of thinking, we got our hockey sense is a big one, because it's typically by the time we're seeing them, hockey sense is unlikely to be taught further when you get to the U19 level. In a lot of ways, you can, learn systems and you can learn positional play really well, but just that instinct and that anticipation is usually a bit of a natural skill. So looking for those things, how they skate, how they handle the puck. But yeah, like you said, there's power forwards, there's goal scorers, there's people that don't go into the corners, but they're super fast. So just having that ability to understand, are their skills, their accumulation of what they have, is that enough to play at the D1 level? Where does that put you? And then allowing the report to kind of speak for itself on who that player is. So this is a 4-star power forward, and this is a 4-star goal scorer. What do you want? Because we're not going to tell them what they want, right? Every team is going to be different. And a lot of times it's not just the goal scorer. You need every role filled in a team. And so it's so important. A lot of girls think that they got to go out there and they got to be the one to score all the goals, and D got to skate the puck all the time. It's like, no, not everyone wants a risky defenseman, right? Some people, you need a stay-at-home defenseman, you need a power forward, you need someone that's going to go end to end, work two ways, make good changes, and get pucks on our sticks.
Yeah, and you're talking about the D. I've definitely seen a bias in at the kind of district and national level towards puck moving defensemen. In fact, I asked one evaluator of like how they evaluated actually playing defense. And they said, well, our team was so good, I didn't even bother evaluating the D. I just wanted to see how they did with the puck on their stick. And so like, are you seeing those biases from certain coaches with what it is that they prefer, and which attributes do you find that in general coaches really value?
Yeah, I mean, skating and puck control and movement would be huge for D. That's going to be a base. You're going to need it. And you're going to need to have enough pace to be able to play, to push the play up and to be able to handle the fast forwards that are coming back. But yeah, coaches are very different. There's a lot of themes on rosters. Some people prefer small and speedy players, and some people fill their rosters with almost 6-foot players. It really is preference. I think people are going to be attracted to the offensive defenseman that skates it up every time, because that might lead to more offense. But there's really only room for a couple of those on a roster, because you can't pair two really offensive defensemen together, in my opinion. Because it's going to be too risky, right? You have to be able to take care of your house and the defensive zone. So nothing against offensive defensemen. Your risk assessment is going to be huge there. Is this a good time to skate it? And then additionally, what do I do when I get into the zone? Because a lot of girls, they have that risk assessment, and then they get in the zone, and what then? Sometimes it's turnovers back the other way. And it's like, well, you just sacrifice your whole positioning. Now forwards taking your spot. So, getting into that zone is important. And then the what's next factor is huge. How do we set it up? can we find a stick, or can we at least keep possession until our forwards come and help us out?
Gotcha. So related to this is, in the few excerpts that I've seen, a lot of your comments are extremely positive and focus on here's what the positive attributes are of a player. I'm wondering how you measure their development areas and how you express that in your evaluations.
Yeah, so we obviously trend to the positive, just because, I mean, at the end of the day, these players are children, right? They're kids, they're girls. And in no way in what we're doing are we trying to, harp on kids' negatives or display negatives to the public that may not be fair or accurate. Everything we put, we want it to be useful to the player and anyone who may be recruiting off that. So I've never seen the need for incredibly negative and harsh reports, but we are working to get a little bit more constructive criticism in there, just by saying things like, this may need to be developed to get to that next level, or this should be a focus moving forward. Just, as helpful tips. But another way to look at it too is if there's things not mentioned, sometimes those are the areas that may need a little bit more development. If you get a tall, strong defender with that heavy shot, like I mentioned, and we don't mention anything about skating, that could be an area that they may need to work on.
Gotcha. And so do you ever actually have players or parents reach out to you, say, can you give me the full report on really everything you saw so that we can learn from it?
No, not a ton. I do get some parents and players. There are typically very, very positive feedback. They're just excited to see something. And I think as we move forward, we've done a good job, and I'm happy to be, more critical and constructive moving forward. But yeah, I don't think that was the need when we started. And yeah, as we grow and more people use us, of course, that pressure is going to be there to provide more things like that. And we're just trying to, find the best way to display that in a way that's, not harmful. Safe sport is super important to me, and, just making sure everyone's, mental health is taken care of and not impacted negatively by kind of what we're writing, but still being unbiased and fair and accurate in what we present.
I'm just curious, have you ever had an angry parent or player kind of reach out to you?
Yeah, we've had a couple, but it's what we do is we're very honest, right? Like, this is what we have, this is what we post. It's not anyone's end fate, right? The coaches are still going to see them, they're going to read the reports, they're going to do their own research. And we work and strive to be very accurate, and we have the largest women's hockey scouting staff. So yeah, it's what we've seen, it's what we've evaluated, what we appreciate from several levels of checks. So we do the best we can, and we have very experienced scouts. So I think what we put out is very accurate, and it's difficult to argue with the way we've set things up to be as accurate as possible and have those checks and be able to put out the best product. So
excellent. So I got two last questions for you. What does PLPG stand for? And explain what it is that you guys do with that.
That is the parking lot post game. So it is a quick video after a game or a tournament day where we just like to, shout out a couple players that have really impressed us that day or that game, and, give a little chat about their attributes as a player. We do it on the men's side too, but it's not really done in the women's side. There's not a lot of people talking critically about a player's performance or things like that. So I think the kids really get excited about it. I'm not incredibly thrilled with videoing myself in the car after games, but the public has loved it. Parents and players love the little shout out, the little recognition there. So yeah, it's good. And it's nice to cap off the day too, because you kind of get a little bit of info. It does take a little bit of time for us to create these reports. So you do kind of see, oh, here's a couple kids from today, like the New England prep tournaments, right? There's a bunch going on. So, maybe a coach hears, wow, this goalie was really good on this team. Let me pop over to that tournament tomorrow. Just little ways that we can, promote players that, have really impressed us, because that's what it's all about, right? Seeing the talent and getting it out there to the world.
Perfect. And then last question, how do you think, what advice would you have for players and parents on how they think about scouting reports and incorporating it into their recruiting process?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've seen a lot of players, attach their report or their wording or little blurb to coaches' emails, which I think is awesome. Absolutely. Yeah, and just, taking a read, and anything you hear, right? Like, you want to take it in as an athlete, you want to use it to make you better, but you can never use it to bring you down, right? Like, you the best, right? So if you ever get, feedback or whatever from a coach or, one of our reports that doesn't feel right, of course, like, you're in a position where you respect that coach, and it's not to go back and say, hey, that's not right, but you take that in yourself, and you can analyze yourself as a player, and try to keep an eye out for some of those things that someone has mentioned to you, and yeah, try to improve, or like I said before, use it as another check on kind of how you're performing, and where you stack up.
Awesome. Excellent. So, Jess, I want to thank you so much for coming on the Champs App podcast. It's great learning about your hockey history, especially how Neutral Zone works, and the different services you provide, and then obviously going into detail about how the scouting process works, and how you evaluate players. So I'll include links in the show notes for how folks can learn more about your services. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention one more thing, if you don't mind, Ray.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So something I didn't mention was when we started it too, is similar to, what you're doing, is the lack of women's hockey information online. Finding rosters and player info was not available when we started this. So just the thought of, creating those profiles and having a place where if someone Googles a kid with hockey after it, that they get a profile that at least says what team they're on, their height, weight, their grad year, and that's all free. So anyone can see those profiles for free. You can update those for free. You did not have to be a subscriber to have a profile or update it or be scouted. We scout unbiasedly. Does not matter if you're a subscriber or anything like that. So yeah, I would also encourage parents and players, if there's anything not up to date or you don't see your profile, there's a fill out the form on the bottom right of any page on Neutral Zone, and that'll get sent right to me, and we'll get that info updated as soon as possible.
I want to thank Jess for coming on the podcast. It was great to learn about her recruiting journey, how she started the women's hockey platform at Neutral Zone, and all the details about how Neutral Zone works. Thanks for listening to today's episode. Before you go, I wanted to share more about the app in Champs App. If you've listened to this podcast before, you know I spend a lot of time talking with coaches, parents, and players about the hockey recruiting process. One of the key questions that people want to know is, how does a player get noticed by college coaches? While there are many ways to be discovered, the easiest way to get on a college's radar is to send a coach an email and provide them all the information they need to assess if you are a player worth keeping their eyes on. That's where the app part of Champs App comes in. Champs App was designed based on all the conversations and feedback we received about the recruiting process, and we've built a tool to help players and coaches connect with a ton of the information they want to know. It all starts with creating a free, beautiful Champs App profile. After that, there's some pretty magical things that can happen to help make the recruiting process a little less overwhelming. Your Champs App profile includes all the basic academic, personal, and athletic information coaches want to know. Then, by including video, schedule information, and your coach's contact details, colleges can easily start their evaluation process. You just copy and paste your personalized link and send it to coaches so they can see your public player profile without even having to log in or create a Champs App account. Or you can connect directly with coaches on Champs App. More and more coaches are creating their own Champs App profiles and connecting with players themselves every day. Now coaches can have all the information they need to assess where you might fit in their recruiting plans. Even better, college coaches can track your progress throughout the winter and showcase seasons, because as you make changes to your profile, coaches will get notified to your updates. And in the future, we will be adding even more amazing features to improve your visibility to the recruiting process and hopefully increase your odds of success. If you want to see what a player or coach profile looks like before you start your own, look in the show notes to see some examples. My kids and I have used Champs app for their recruiting process. In fact, my son was invited to a AAA tryout thanks to his Champs app profile. So go to www.champs.app and start your player or coach profile. It only takes about 15 to 20 minutes to complete most of your key information. Good luck, and please let us know how it helped with your recruiting journey.